So recently I bought a Super Nintendo Classic that came with every North American Super Nintendo game that was ever released. And when I saw that I had the chance to get a regular Nintendo Classic that also had every North American Nintendo game that was ever released, I couldn't pass it up. Now, like I said in that review of the modded Super Nintendo, I am completely new to emulation. I still have an original Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and that's how I've always played these older games. So in this video, I'm going to show you something that's very, very interesting, and it's something that I bet 99.99999% of people who play these emulated classic games have no clue about when it comes to this stuff. But first, I want to take a look at this system because I know that there are fake systems out there. In fact, the Super Nintendo Classic that I bought turned out to be a fake knockoff, but I ended up keeping it anyway because it's still a really great piece of gear and it plays awesome. So my first clue with the Super Nintendo Classic that I bought that it was a fake was the box. I could tell by some of the coloration on the box that it was not an original even before I opened it. But this one, I can already tell that it looks good. At least the box looks good. And you can watch videos about these, the real ones versus the fake ones and how to tell the difference. But so far, this one looks good. Now, one thing that was cool is the original Nintendo Classic only comes with one controller, but the guy I bought this from included a second controller, and he also included these extension cables for the controllers, which are definitely needed. I don't know why Nintendo made these cables for these controllers so freaking short, but they are way too short really to be used. I mean, you really have to sit like 2 feet away from a television or monitor or whatever you're using when you're playing the games. These extension cables make it a much better experience, and you really have to have them. Okay, so far everything looks good. This Nintendo looks good. From what I've seen, this is an authentic Nintendo Classic. It's not a knockoff so far, from what I can tell. And like I said, I mean, the Super Nintendo version that I bought was a knockoff, but it still was completely fine. So even if this turned out not to be a real one, as long as the gameplay is there and everything looks and feels okay, I would probably keep it anyway, just like with the Super Nintendo that I bought. And so far, the controller looks good. And one of the telltale signs is it has Nintendo actually embossed into the plastic where the connector is. So I'm pretty confident that this is an authentic Nintendo Classic. And the second controller is also authentic, or it looks to be authentic. And these controllers feel so great. Like they just feel just like the original controllers. And with this particular system, this is where the magic happens. This is the piece, the adapter and the USB stick where all the games are stored. This is what allows this system to run every Nintendo game, North American Nintendo game that was ever released. And hopefully they'll all be on there. My Super Nintendo version was missing Super Metroid. And honestly, it might be missing a few other games. I didn't check every single game and compare it to a list of every North American Super Nintendo game. But for the price that I pay for these systems and for everything you get, it doesn't matter if they're missing 1 or 2 games, in my opinion. So here's my little setup where I just play these old consoles that I love so much. Like these games to me, I mean, they're the classic games. And I still love playing them. So obviously that's the reason I'm buying these systems and doing this setup. But I don't need this Super Nintendo anymore, and I don't need my Nintendo anymore. So I'll probably just put those away in storage and just use these mini systems since every game is just right here now. So now everything is hooked up. It's very simple. I'm running these on an old school CRT television, which is how these games should be played in my opinion. If you have a CRT available, use it. And if you don't have one and you're going to have a setup like this, you definitely need to go get a CRT television. They're out there. We should be using them. This is how these games were made to be played. They were made to be played on these old televisions, not these newer monitors. So that's my opinion. That's how I play these games. And so far, I don't see the folder that's supposed to be there on the right with all the extra games. Let me mess with this and see if I can get the folder to pop up. I hope so, because that's the whole reason I bought this. Okay, so after unplugging the adapter and messing with it a little bit, now I've got the folder there that has all the extra games. So go into more games, and here we go. These are all the North American Nintendo games are within these folders. I'm gonna go to one just to check it out real quick. I'm gonna choose Metroid, which is one of my favorite games and game series of all time. But real quick, we'll just take a look and see. Look at all these games. How awesome is this? If everything works properly, And this is going to be really, really cool. All right, and here's Metroid, and you just can't beat that classic Metroid music. I mean, it is great. Now, so far, this sounds pretty good. I'm not sure. The screen is a little weird. And you can mess with the settings, the screen settings, but I don't really understand the black bars on either side. But the game plays really great. It feels great. I mean, again, like the Super Nintendo that I bought that was modded, this, you're not going to know the difference. Like if you just hand a controller to somebody, especially if they've never even played Metroid, they're not going to know this is an emulator. You could easily convince them this is the real game, in my opinion. So far, I'm very impressed with Metroid, but of course, I'm going to check out a number of games during this review, and we'll just take a look at them and see if I notice any problems. And here I'm just going to test out the save feature, which to me is amazing when it comes to these emulated games. Like I said, I don't know anything about this emulation, so to me, and it works perfectly, the save feature, to me that is a really awesome thing, to just be able to stop anywhere during a game and just save it, no matter what screen you're on. I mean, to me, that's amazing. So now I'm going to go back and take a look at some more games. And again, look at all these games. I mean, this is amazing. I'm going to try to find, what should I play? So now I'm going to play a game that's one of everybody's favorite Nintendo games of all time, The Karate Kid. Absolutely. I loved this game when I was a kid, and I listened to that music. It's just amazing. The music in this game is awesome. Now, I'm just joking around. I know a lot of people don't really like this game, but I always liked it. So, and again, nobody's going to know this is not the original game. If you just handed them a controller and said, here, play this, they're going to be playing The Karate Kid on Nintendo. So, just like with Metroid, the game sounds good. It plays good. The controller feels great. The controls feel great for what they are in this game, which is fine to me. But the screen is still got those big black bars on either side. It's really kind of odd looking, and I don't know why that is. I guess it has something to do with the emulation. But I'm going to try something in a little bit. So let me look at a couple more games here, and then I want to do a little test. So now I'm just going to quickly play through a game that probably is one of everyone's favorite Nintendo games if you played this back in the day, and that is ice hockey. You cannot beat ice hockey. It's still super, super fun to play even today. When people come over and they see this, they are definitely going to want to play ice hockey, and I could probably play this game for hours on my own because to me that's how fun it is. But anyway, again, just like the first two games I've tried so far, everything looks great. The control feels great. It sounds great. But yet again, we still have like this weird aspect ratio with the screen. Plus, by this time, I've noticed something else with this emulation, and I'll show that again. What we're going to do, I'm going to do a test, and I'll show that here in a minute. And I know one of the differences because I just tried. I just saw it before I sat down to try this NES Classic. So real quick, I'll just do one more game. I'm going to play Pro Wrestling, another classic that I spent many, many, many hours back in the 80s, early 90s playing. I'm sure it's the gameplay. I haven't played this game in many, many, many years, but I'm sure the gameplay is pretty simple, especially compared to today's stuff. But, you know, as long as it's still fun. And I really am buying these systems so when people come over, we can play all these games. Now we have every Super Nintendo game and every Nintendo game, North American Nintendo game. And, I mean, you could spend probably a year or more playing all these games, and because they're just fun. So Pro Wrestling, same thing with the first two games. Sounds great. It plays great. Still has the weird aspect ratio thing going on, which obviously by this point I'm expecting every game to have. And I think there's one more game that I want to check out, and then I'm going to do this test and show you something that's very, very interesting about these emulated games, or at least these games made with this certain emulator. So now we're going to check out what may be my favorite video game of all time. I know a lot of people say that, and it's probably cliche and all this, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I've loved this game since I had it like back in 1988-ish, 89, and I still love it to this day, and I play it regularly. And now that I'm actually seeing it and playing it, I definitely can tell a difference. If you handed me this game on this emulator, I would immediately know a difference, especially one major difference. But I do want to say the game sounds good, but the controller for this one does seem like it's a little off. But let me go ahead and jump in and do this test, and I'll show you some things. And I'm going to use Zelda and maybe a couple of other games to do it, but check this out. Here is Zelda on the original Nintendo, and you can immediately tell a difference. The colors are much more vibrant. I didn't change any of the settings on the TV or nothing. I'm just plugging these systems in and turning them on. So you can immediately see that the colors are more vibrant, and the screen and the image fills the screen. And I'll show you in a second side by side where you can see the classic that I have compared to the original, and you just cannot beat the original. Now, here's something that's very interesting. I was just watching one of the videos I watched about how to spot a fake version of these NES Classic consoles, and the guy had two of them. He had a real one and he had a fake one. And the fake one, he was complaining about how the games looked. What's interesting is when he plugged up his authentic Nintendo Classic system, it looked really similar to this NES Classic system that I have. The games looked almost the same, or they are the same, I guess. The fake NES Classic that he had when he was playing those games looked more like the original Nintendo games look that I'm showing right now. So Zelda, it sounds great, but it looks a little weird. And these controls, I am noticing a bit of a difference. Now, if you handed me this, I would know the difference with the controls for sure. But it's not absolutely horrible. This game it's definitely playable. But there is a difference with the controls, especially moving. That's the biggest difference I notice. And that's a big thing. You know, sometimes in Zelda, you need some pretty precise movements, especially when you get into the later dungeon levels and you're really having to book it and move around really quickly and avoid enemies and all that. But just playing this game for however long I've played it now, like a minute, I could definitely adapt to this version of this game and pretty easily, especially if somebody's never really played Zelda. Either way, I could tell a difference with this game, but if somebody who had never played this game was playing this version, I'm sure they would adapt to the controls very quickly. But so far, I mean, the original Zelda just crushes the NES Classic emulated Zelda all day. I mean, there's not even a comparison. The controls feel so much better and smoother. The colors are much more vibrant. The screen is full. It's not all scrunched up in the middle. I mean, this is the original Nintendo on an original old school CRT television. So this is what this game is supposed to look like. This is what it would have looked like if you were playing this, 30 something years ago. If you would have went to the store and bought this is what you would see. You would not see the emulated version that you see on the Nintendo Classic. Now I'm just going to switch back over to the Nintendo Classic, and here you see the screen, title screen, and you can clearly see the difference in how much better the original Nintendo looks. The colors are much more dull. Just the overall image and graphics don't look as good. So, but like I said, the main thing is that if this is all if I wanted to play Zelda and this is all I had, this would be completely fine. I only was able to spot these differences because I know what this original Nintendo looks like, and I know what Zelda looks like especially, and I know how it plays. That's how I was immediately able to spot the difference. But again, if you just hand someone one of these controllers and say, here, play The Legend of Zelda, they are not gonna know the difference. I can almost guarantee that. And here, again, you can see the original Nintendo, and you can just see how much different it looks. And here, obviously, I've got it pulled up side by side, again, so you can see the differences with how these games look. The original on the right, and the Nintendo Classic version on the left. So that's Zelda, and I'm going to come back and play Zelda for a little bit longer later. I'm not going to show all that in this video, but we have to check out Mario Brothers. Even though this is not one of my favorite games, I used to love it, but now I just don't ever play any of the Mario Brothers games on these old systems that much. Even the Super Nintendo. Maybe I will one day. I'll go back and play them, but I just haven't been really interested. Since I have every game, that's not really on my high up on my list to play them. I don't know. I used to love them when I was a kid, so I don't know why now I'm just not really interested in them. Anyway, you can see what it looks like on the Nintendo Classic. It's got the same problems. It's got the muted colors, and the aspect ratio is definitely off. And here again is the original Nintendo, and you can immediately see how much better the original console looks. But I do have to say that with this comparison, I don't notice that much of a difference with the controls. They both feel pretty much the same. There probably is still a slight difference, with the NES Classic just not feeling quite as good as the original console. But again, you could easily get used to it. But I don't think it's as noticeable with Super Mario Brothers as it is in The Legend of Zelda. And here again, I'm just going to show some side-by-side comparison shots with the original Nintendo console on the right and the NES Classic on the left. And I mean, it's obviously you can tell there's a big difference. But yet again, I know I'm repeating myself over and over, but I just want to make sure that you understand that the average person is not going to know this. If you just hand them this controller and say, here, play Super Mario Brothers on the Nintendo, that's what they're going to do, and they're going to play it. And unless there's some kind of, I don't know, Super Mario Brothers like world champion player or something, they're not going to notice any difference with these controls or the graphics or anything. They're just going to play it, and they're probably going to have a lot of fun. So this system is definitely playable. I mean, I don't have any complaints really with it. I'm just pointing out the differences for this video and to let people know that, about these emulators, because like I said, a lot of people who play these emulated games probably don't realize this because they've only played the emulated games. It's probably been many, many years, if at all, that they've ever played these Nintendo games on an original console. So here I'm going back to play The Legend of Zelda on the NES Classic because like I said, I play this game all the time, and I just want to see, I'm going to try to forget that I know what the original Nintendo version looks like and just approach this like I'm playing The Legend of Zelda for the first time just on what I have, which is the NES Classic. So I'm going to try to forget the control differences and see if I can just adapt to the controls and not really notice it. And obviously I'm not going to do that in real time on this video because it's just would be a waste of time. So what I did is I played Zelda for around 10 minutes, and I know that's not a huge amount of time, but trust me when I say that exactly what I thought would happen happened, and I did adapt to the controls. These controls are completely fine. Yes, they are a little different than the original game on the original console, but again, you're not going to know that. Nobody's going to know that if they've never played Zelda or if they haven't played it in 30-something years or 20 years or however long it's been. They're just not going to know it. They're not going to notice the graphics being different. They're not going to notice certainly the sound. The sound is great on this system. And again, I think that this version of the game is completely fine, and that you were going to have a great time playing this version of the game if this is all you had to play. But there is a difference, just to let you know, with this particular emulator, and maybe all emulated games like this. I don't know. But this system definitely has some differences. But overall, I definitely recommend this system if you have a chance to pick one up. And actually, I will leave a link in the description of where you can buy this exact system if you're interested. But so far, even with the differences, I'm very impressed, and I'm going to have who knows how many hours of fun playing these old games, especially when other people come over and they love playing these old classic games. And that's with all the two-player games on here. I mean, it's like countless hours of fun. So I'm super excited that I have this, and I'm really, really looking forward to sitting down and playing all these classic games. It is going to be awesome. So that's my review of this NES Classic that comes with every North American Nintendo game. And so far, I'm super impressed, even with the differences. And I recommend that you pick it up if you have a chance. Again, the link will be in the description.